Hi. So yesterday I did a talk on fashion. So I decided to get like my favorite dress. This one like feels like super like princessy. So it makes me feel really good. I put it on in the store and was just like, all my femininity all at once. So this is a great topic to cover today, actually. The yin and yang of masculinity and femininity and how that works as being a trans person. I want to make this a little broader. Usually I just talk to trans women, but today we're just going to make this broad for just trans folks in general. The yin and yang of masculinity and femininity. So being trans is kind of like an interesting thing. You have a lot of experience of masculinity and you have a lot of experience of femininity all wrapped into one. Depending on which side of the aisle you start. I hate saying that. You know what I mean? I don't mean like, like there's only two genders. Okay, for all the non-binary folks, it's totally a spectrum and everyone should know that. But starting with the foundation of believing that you started in a binary space, there's some experiences to that. And then when you layer on hormones, there's definitely experiences and perception that shifts because of that, right? Under testosterone, I found my attention more directed, more precise, and also anger and frustration a lot easier to experience. Versus with estrogen, like my frustration, anger went away, my awareness kind of expanded emotionally, and I saw the world from a more holistic way. It actually affects me in ways where I feel like I do a lot more things. But that's another topic. To the femininity and masculinity, as I've evolved, it's kind of like, it's been a process where originally before I knew I was trans, I was struggling with the fact that my masculinity was not there. Like I tried to emulate the masculinity that society tells you to be a valuable man would work. And I did a good job at emulating it and embodying and carrying it with me authentically. But I never felt happy with it. And that's kind of like the part where you're like, oh, maybe I'm trans. Like, have you had that question? That's kind of like the thing, So that was the whole process of transitioning, and a big part of the process is wanting to get rid of a lot of that energy of that previous gender because you're trying to distance yourself from that. Now, there's some people who knew they were trans since they were born, and they've kind of like worked with that energy very early in their transition. But for me, and I think for a lot of folks, they're realizing this later once they have a language, once they have exposure to this. And I think that means you also have this experience of living in that body, like as a cis male. I was a cis male, and now I am a trans woman. And so with that, I have masculinity as a part of my package and experience. Now, you don't have to be that gender to have masculinity or femininity. But that's a part of your experience, and depending on your personality, you can have different vibes depending on where you are. And I think this is where the yin-yang steps in. Your movement and your shifting of where you are in your own inner space and how you express that to the world. That is finding the balance, and that's finding the yin-yang. Now, everything has a yin-yang. There's a balance with everything, but depending on how your balance works, it can be different. For me, I like to be very feminine. And so if I were to take the yin yang, I would put myself on the extreme of the feminine. But that also, for finding the opposite, I tend to gravitate towards partners who are on the other extreme, which is more masculine, extremely masculine. And by having that, they create space for my femininity. Now, I'm also attracted to women. And so when I date women, it's kind of like a microcosm of finding that masculinity and femininity with the energy of the space. But unfortunately for me, long term, that just doesn't work out because I really like being pushed into that feminine space. Now, you may have noticed how I'm talking. Have you noticed how sometimes I say things very precisely and at other times I step back and talk a little bit more abstractly? Being masculine and having masculine energy isn't always gender expression. And my masculine energy within myself gives me this innate ability to articulate and say things very precisely. I've noticed in work settings, because I'm so precise and articulate, I never have issues expressing myself. And I feel like I gain a lot of respect from my peers, who are men mostly. On the other side, I've known some women who've worked in tech who haven't been as able to express themselves and articulate themselves in a way that I would say is more like typical, like cis woman, which is, more feeling based, and there is some precision, but it may be lacking in some areas of articulation. And I think anyone can learn to be more articulate. But I think there's also an energy and experience that comes to working with your masculine and feminine. And I notice this a lot with trans men, actually. They're very good at articulating themselves. And so I think there's an aspect that I've started to work with, which is understanding that myself has a masculine aspect to myself that isn't going away, and it's going to continue to be here, which is this need to be precise and to kind of strike on certain tones and certain subjects and certain things, so that way I can transfer that to you. Have you felt sometimes where you're looking for an answer and you're kind of drifting, and then you go, oh yeah, that's it, right? That's sort of this aspect of the yin yang where you're allowing space, you're creating this feminine, or let's say passive energy that you kind of expand into. You allow space for something to kind of take shape and form. And then when it strikes the realization, it becomes materialized into the tangible, whether that's a word or an idea or a thought. And that interlocking between the expanding and the contracting into solidity, that's masculine and feminine energy too. That's the yin yang. That's how you can move between thoughts. And I think this is really, really powerful, and especially something that makes trans people incredible, because they work within this space so much more than typical people, because we become more conscious of this experience and we become more aware of how to move between the feminine and the masculine. So in my experience, sometimes I'm just running away from the masculine. And I'll be honest with you, my own dysphoria that I experience nowadays is that if I'm not talking to you, if I'm not articulating myself, if I'm not in a social setting, my femininity feels like it's gone, because I'm just with myself, and the thoughts in my head and the way that I'm operating are on this masculine undertone. Do you ever feel inside yourself that you're not feeling the authenticity that you know you are, that you, let's say you're a woman, but you're in a masculine paradigm in terms of your body, in terms of maybe your hormones have been previously and the way that you used to operate. You have this underlying framework of masculinity in your masculine expression that you may still be working through, whether that's how you move in the morning, how you just hold your shoulders. All of these things, they all add up to this self-fulfilling feedback that gives you this sense of who you are and continues to build on that. And that's the tricky part of perception, and that's the thing that we work on as trans folks, right? We look at ourselves and we start to teach ourselves that we're different, and this is the evolution of your dysphoria. So when working with this yin-yang of the masculinity and femininity, I think it's important to understand where your space is, and if you feel confused, to clear out your space within yourself so you can make space for the femininity, for the masculinity, because there's operating systems within us, especially our brain, that's hardwired to experience certain things in certain ways, and you have to unlearn those neural bindings. I don't even know if that's a word, but neural networks that form and bond really strongly, you have to unbind those, and the only way to unbind them is to teach a new route to that firing of the nerve. So if you want to express something, learning to teach yourself to take a step back, clear out, like for me, the masculine energy, and then go in with the feminine, that allows me to do a lot of special things. One of the most surprising and funny things is, for some reason, I'm able to hit things on the nail that would be potentially awkward conversations for other people in work and also in life. And so I'm actually very direct in calling out things in a way that is non-threatening for people. And I haven't seen anyone else do this around me. And I get this commentary from women and men, like, how did you do that? For example, I needed to ask for a space at work one time, and they were sitting in the space, and I said, hey, do you guys think I could use the space? We got to shoot this video. And the way I expressed it seemed to work with them, and they're just like, yeah, sure, totally. And the woman next to me is like, how did you do that? How did you? I don't know. There's a magic to working with your masculinity and femininity that I think you can recognize within you, which is a gift that can enable you to kind of like move and wedge in between certain cultural constructs of what expectations are for your communication, where you can kind of like get in between it. For me at work, that's understanding how to work with the masculine and then using the feminine to address it in a way that's soft and gentle and collaborative and helpful and feeling positive, rather than coming across as aggressive or coming across as confrontational. I'm able to weave and create relationships with the people that I work with that are positive, as well as have tough conversations that are not tough, because I can work that nuance. And I think you can too. Where in your life are you able to find where you can kind of wedge in between that masculinity and femininity and kind of move in a way that really gets to where you want to go? And I think that's like one of the most amazing things. So there's probably an infinite way of approaching this topic, and I'll probably make this again, but I'd love to hear from you in terms of what your experience has been like as you've moved with your masculinity and femininity, or if you want to call it something else, your passive and active energy. So with that, I close today's tea time session. This is unedited, unscripted. I do this every day. I'd love to see you at the next one. And if this is your first video, say hello. I'll see you tomorrow. As they say in Berlin, tschüss.